Good morning. It is now Monday, February 12th, 2024. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. What a week it has been. Wow. And 2024 is shaping up to be a very interesting and strange year. First off, the Tucker Carlson Putin interview backlash. All I can say is wow to that. At any other time in journalistic history, people would be jealous of Tucker for getting such a scoop. But to see the vitriol that people like the commentators at CNN, MSNBC, and all these other places was shocking even for someone like me. At any other time in history, if someone was able to interview someone, and by the way, I like to point out that we are not at war with Russia. So it was not interviewing the enemy. I don't know what else to say. The stuff I saw on CNN and MSNBC was so far beyond what could even be comprehended as journalism. It was propaganda that would have made Joseph Goebbels of Nazi Germany fame kind of cringe. He'd say, that's too much. It was that insanely crazy. This guy has been attacked Hillary Clinton, of course, that interview with MSNBC, which if you want to go watch it, do, but do so with a critical eye and especially a critical ear. I'm going to have to say this at this point, folks. Don't even bother with anything remotely resembling the mainstream media because it's demonstrated what it's become. It is overreach. The bad guys always go too far. It's the way it's been since the beginning of time. People who do not have your best interest at heart have just gone too far. I gave a analysis of his interview, but to see the backlash of what I've seen just shows how much fear is in the hearts of those who govern us. So I don't know what else to say about that. I have not heard about him returning to the United States yet. There's people calling for his arrest. This is insanity. No, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a mental health professional, but I know insanity when I see it, and this is what we're seeing. In other news, please be prepared to deal with distractions. Personally, I do not care one little bit about professional sports. I know there was something called the Super Bowl that happened yesterday. I don't care about it. I don't care about anyone's girlfriend flying in from overseas to be with her boyfriend. This is bread and circuses. This is what the Romans were really big on as their empire was going downhill. And I think we have too many other things we got to deal with besides such folly. They want you distracted, folks. When bad guys are in charge, they want you distracted. And that's the way it's also been throughout history. Now, here in Virginia, there's lots of new anti-gun legislation which has passed the legislature, and it's supposed to go to the governor's desk. I don't believe he's going to sign any of it, or at least not most of it. But it's a good trial run for what they're going to be doing when a Democrat does get into power in Virginia. The law here is that you cannot be reelected to the office of governor. You can only do one term, and then someone else has to take over. And given the way the politics are, it's probably going to be a Democrat next time around, in which case you're going to see all sorts of interesting legislation get passed. Some of it will probably be beyond the realm of mental comprehension for most of us. I would say this is why Virginia is being targeted is January 20th, 2020, the famous Lobby Day the Virginia Citizens Defense League put on, where upwards of 100 to 150,000 people, depending on who you talk to, showed up armed in Virginia at the Capitol, and that scared the bejesus out of the establishment. So they've been working at getting back at the country since then, not just Virginia. This is basically revenge for that, and they're going to do everything they can to disarm Virginia. The fact that it's also borders Washington, D.C. is probably another factor as well. Speaking of which, I'm going to advise people Washington, D.C.'s crime has gone through the ceiling. Carjackings are very, very common. I have heard from some good sources that if they see an out-of-state plate, a very far out-of-state plate, like a tourist, if it comes from Ohio or Kansas or something, you're especially vulnerable. One of the members of the Trump administration, former members of the Trump administration, was killed in a carjacking. The Capitol is getting way too dangerous. Northern Virginia is way too dangerous, and this is all on account of the policies that we have allowed to be put in place where the borders are not secure and people are just pouring in. A lot of these crimes are being committed by invaders, and I'm not going to call them anything else. They are invaders. Now, I do have some good sources down at the border area of the United States, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and they've been telling me something that has not been covered too much, and that is quite simply the biological attack that's occurring by way of these immigrants. Now, I don't want to have anyone, I don't want to be too gross here, but the people coming across the border have not been given any health checks. They have not been to a doctor, in many cases, probably for their entire lives. Their digestive tracts are swimming with disease, and I've been told that by a few people down there who told me quite simply, nobody should take a public toilet break anywhere in the U.S. If you do, you are risking infection more than would be usual. I'm going to give a direct quote here from one of my sources. He said, "A good number of these people have never experienced a solid bowel movement in their entire lives." That doesn't sound too good. So what some people have told me is that if you do go out and you have to use public restroom facilities, be very careful and bring some disinfectant with you. That might be a good idea. Avoid them at all costs, I've been told to some people, but you can't always do that if you're traveling on the interstate. Rest areas in highway regions are also vulnerable. These people are just crossing the border and being shipped all over. And I have seen in Northern Virginia over the last 18, 20 months a massive increase in just people hanging around who don't look like they were born here, milling around at shopping centers or gas stations or other places where they're looking for day work. It's just, there was always that going on, but it's just gotten to be almost like I don't know what you'd say. It looks like a building has been emptied out after a fire drill in some places. And the big problem we're seeing also with this massive invasion from south of the border is prostitution. Now, I have, over the last few years, I've had business dealings in the Hispanic community in Northern Virginia, and there's some great people in it, some of the better Americans you'll find in that community, very solid people. But what I learned, and this is why many of them are against illegal immigration, is that in many of these Central and South American countries, the age of sexual consent is far lower than it is here in the United States. In some places I know of, it's like 13, and one of the issues they had was the newcomers, the invaders showing up and then seeing young girls and propositioning them on the streets. This was an issue in Prince William County area. So we're bringing people in who also have no understanding of our laws, no interest in following them, and they come from a culture where it's perfectly acceptable to try to go after a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl. So this is another danger we have that has been willfully introduced by the current presidential administration, if you can call it presidential. You're bringing in massive numbers of people who are, in many cases, diseased. They do not abide by our laws, by very definition of coming in illegally, and they come from cultures where the age of sexual consent is far lower than is legally or socially acceptable in the United States. And nothing's really being done to stop it. You tell me if that's a problem or not. So the advice is quite simply to go out in public, be careful, have antiseptic with you or some sort of something that's anti-germ, You can get cans of spray to use in public toilets if you need to, but just be real careful. This is coming from people at the border, folks. This is not, and it's not something that they're going to talk about on the news, if you call it that anymore. Now, one of the more dangerous states, I'm being told, is also Colorado. That has really gone off the deep end. Denver is turning into a real horrible place. I haven't been to Denver in many years. It was always a fun place. I loved it, and the idea of yet another beautiful American city being turned into a sewer is heartbreaking. But follow the news in Colorado, because that is sort of where the establishment that's trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do, destroy the country, overthrow the native population here. But just follow what's going on in Denver and Colorado. You will find that quite interesting. The other thing, of course, Ukraine and Gaza, that's an ongoing issue. Tucker Carlson, of course, contributed information to that debate. The source to follow on that is retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's all over the place. He has his own YouTube channel and other places. He gets interviewed. This guy does know what he's talking about, which is why he's being shunned in many cases by the mainstream media. He's on various alternative media sources, which I would recommend you start listening to. And he's pretty worried, and he has reason to be worried. I'm not going to put words in his mouth. I would recommend you seek out his material. It comes out regularly, and he's probably the best, most reliable military source out there for what's going on. There's a lot of good sources out there. I'm going to recommend people follow the channel Redacted. That's on YouTube for now. Sources not to follow is the Drudge Report. I think that has turned into a nothing more than a propaganda sheet, which is pretty awful. There are other sources out there, including myself, who does go through some of this stuff and tries to produce a report once a week. I could easily do something one a day, but I can't do this as a full-time job, as you know. So I'm going to end it there. If you like what you hear, please consider a paid subscription. I can be followed on Twitter, which is now known as X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN, MICCAMPEN. If you want to send me a note, you can send it to feedback@aureliancolumn.com, feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I will provide news and information as I can. As I say every week, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and good day.